The baby's cry ripped through the sterile air of the hospital, echoing louder than the hum of fluorescent lights. Emily Hart, her chest tight, froze where she stood. The nurse whispered, "It's your daughter." Emily shook her head in denial, her voice trembling. "No, that can't be true." Her pulse thundered as if every heartbeat wanted to escape her chest. She searched the nurse's eyes for a mistake, but the silence only deepened the nightmare. The scent of antiseptic mixed with the raw human sound of the infant. Emily whispered, "I don't even know her name." The nurse leaned closer, her tone soft yet heavy. "She knows yours." In that moment, Emily's world crumbled, the ground beneath her collapsing. The child, impossibly small, reached with trembling fingers. Emily gasped as the sound of her own name fell from lips too young to form it. "Mama?" Her body shook. It was impossible, unreal, yet undeniable. Tears blurred her vision as the walls seemed to close in. Emily whispered, "No one told me. No one prepared me. How could this be mine?" Emily stumbled backward, her breath ragged, as the nurse repeated the impossible truth. The room spun and she whispered, "No one told me. I can't be her mother." The words hung heavy in the sterile air. Shadows of judgment seemed to creep from the walls, whispering that she had failed before she even began. The baby's cry cut through, sharp and desperate, pulling her forward again despite her instinct to flee. Her pulse thudded in her ears, louder than the world itself. Emily pressed her palms to her face, muffling a sob, her mind begging for this nightmare to end. The nurse reached out, gentle but firm, saying, "She belongs to you." Emily's knees buckled as her body sank to the cold floor. She whispered, "I can't, I don't know how." The baby's cry softened, fragile and pleading. For a moment, Emily wondered if she could disappear. But even as she thought it, she knew the sound of that voice would haunt her forever. Emily forced herself upright, legs trembling, eyes rimmed red. She whispered, "Why me?" The nurse's silence echoed louder than any answer. Her body felt hollow, as if every ounce of strength had been stripped away. She took one staggering step toward the incubator, each movement weighed with fear. The baby's chest rose and fell, steady, fragile, alive. Emily's throat tightened, tears dripping onto the glass. She whispered, "What do I do with you?" The baby stirred as if in reply, the sound of soft breathing filling the air. The silence was unbearable, pressing down like judgment from every direction. Emily remembered her past, the abandonment, the betrayal, and felt the old scars tear open. Her hands hovered just above the glass, trembling. "I don't deserve this," she breathed, voice cracking. The baby shifted again, and the fragile sound of life seemed to demand she stay, even as her heart screamed to run. The nurse's voice broke the silence, calm but unyielding. "She needs you." Emily shook her head, pressing her palm to the glass. She whispered, "I never asked for this." Her body trembled as fear and guilt battled within her chest. The sterile air smelled of bleach and sorrow. The baby's cry was softer now, a fragile thread pulling her closer. Emily's reflection in the incubator showed a stranger, a woman she did not recognize. "I can't be what she needs," she whispered. The nurse placed a hand gently on Emily's shoulder, grounding her to reality. "You already are." The words cut like a blade, both cruel and tender. Emily's lips quivered, her chest rising in uneven breaths. She felt her knees weaken again but refused to fall. The baby's small hand brushed against the inside of the incubator, and Emily flinched, torn between terror and awe. Her world was collapsing, yet she couldn't look away. Emily staggered backward, her hands trembling at her sides. She whispered, "No one told me the truth." Her voice was hollow, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might shatter her ribs. The nurse stayed silent, knowing words would only deepen the wound. Emily turned toward the door, body tense, muscles screaming to flee. But the baby's soft whimper froze her mid-step. She stood still, breathing uneven, every nerve torn between escape and surrender. "I can't do this," Emily whispered, though her voice shook with uncertainty. The baby whimpered again, the sound echoing in her chest like a heartbeat. Emily's tears blurred the world, and she pressed her hand to her lips, choking back a sob. She wanted to run until the sound disappeared. But the child's voice, impossibly small yet infinite, anchored her in place. Emily whispered, almost pleading, "Why did you have to say my name?" Emily sat in the corner of the dim hospital waiting room, her knees drawn to her chest. She whispered, "Why did she call me that?" Her thoughts spun like a storm, dragging old scars to the surface. Abandonment clawed at her chest as she remembered the night her own mother left. The word mama echoed, fragile yet unstoppable. Emily pressed her forehead against her knees, whispering, "I'm not strong enough." Her body ached with the weight of shame, yet her heart twisted in defiance. The nurse's voice replayed again and again, "She belongs to you." Emily's chest tightened as tears slid down her cheeks. No one had ever belonged to her. No one had ever stayed. And yet this tiny life had spoken her name, a claim that cut deeper than any wound. She lifted her head, eyes burning, as if daring the world to deny what she had heard. Emily lifted her head slowly, her breath uneven, and stared at the blank walls. She whispered, "If I touch her, everything changes." Fear clawed through her, wrapping tight around her ribs. She remembered the nights she swore never to repeat her mother's mistakes. The silence of the room pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. Her reflection in the darkened window showed not a childless woman, but a mother terrified of becoming the same ghost she once hated. Her voice cracked as she said, "I don't know how to love her." The words sliced through her chest like a confession to a crime she hadn't committed yet. Emily's hands trembled as they hovered in midair, unsure if they wanted to reach out or stay frozen forever. The baby's cry returned faintly from the nursery, reminding her that choice was no longer hers. Emily walked back toward the nursery, each step dragging like lead. The glass wall loomed before her, revealing rows of swaddled infants. But her eyes locked only on the baby that had spoken her name. She whispered, "Why you?" Her heart pounded, not with love, but with dread. She remembered the boy she once trusted, the promises he broke, the shame he left behind. That shame now lay in a crib, fragile and breathing. Emily pressed her hand against the glass, the cold biting her skin, as if the world itself wanted to remind her of her unworthiness. The baby shifted, tiny chest rising and falling. Emily whispered, "I'll ruin you." The words barely left her lips before she realized she was shaking. Her tears fell, hot and silent, as her reflection blurred into the fragile life she feared to touch. The nurse approached quietly, her voice steady yet sharp. "You can't keep standing outside forever." Emily flinched, her body rigid, eyes locked on the child she both feared and craved. She whispered, "If I step in, I can't walk away." The nurse's gaze was unyielding, carrying the weight of truths Emily wasn't ready to bear. "Then don't walk away," she said. Emily shook her head, her chest tightening with panic. She remembered how love once betrayed her, leaving scars too deep to heal. "I'm not her," she whispered, meaning her mother, the ghost she swore never to become. The nurse placed a clipboard gently against the counter, waiting for Emily's choice. Emily's breath hitched, her body trembling, as she felt herself balanced on a razor's edge between fear and surrender. Emily stood with her back against the door, chest rising and falling like she had run miles. The baby stirred again, her tiny cry reaching through the glass, softer now, almost pleading. Emily whispered, "I don't want to need you." Her voice cracked, her throat burning with the lie, because she already did. Her hands trembled at her sides, fists clenched to keep herself from reaching forward. The nurse lingered in silence, giving her no escape from the choice. Emily's tears fell freely now, each one carving a path through the mask she had worn for years. She whispered again, this time broken, "Don't make me love you." The baby's fragile voice answered, not in words, but in the weight of need. Emily closed her eyes, her body folding into the truth she could no longer deny. Emily stepped out of the hospital the next morning, the air sharp with winter frost. The weight of her secret pressed harder with every breath. People stared, their whispers cutting into her skin. She heard one say, "That's the girl with the baby." Her body stiffened as shame clawed at her chest. She gripped her jacket tighter, hiding trembling hands. A memory of her father's cold voice echoed, "You'll ruin this family." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she forced them back. She whispered to herself, "I didn't ask for this." The child's cry still echoed in her ears, haunting every step. She wanted to run until her feet bled, yet the sound bound her like chains. For the first time, she realized escape would never silence the truth. Emily's father, Richard Hart, stood in their living room, arms folded, face hardened. His voice was cold as stone. "You brought shame to us." Emily's throat closed, her words barely a whisper. "I didn't know." His glare cut deeper. "Everyone knows now." She shrank under his gaze, feeling like a child again, the walls of the house pressing down. The silence carried decades of disappointment. Emily's hands trembled at her sides as tears blurred her vision. She whispered, "She didn't ask for this either." Richard's jaw clenched, unmoved, his silence louder than his anger. In that moment, Emily realized she had no allies in this house, only judgment and blame. Emily's best friend, Claire Miller, stood at the edge of the cafe, arms crossed. Her sharp tone carried betrayal. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily's eyes lowered, unable to meet hers. "I didn't know," she whispered, voice shaking. Claire shook her head, anger rising. "Now, everyone thinks I knew too." Emily flinched, the sting of abandonment sharper than expected. The clatter of cups and chatter around them faded into background noise. She whispered, "I'm sorry." Claire's jaw tightened, eyes cold. "Sorry won't fix this." Emily felt the walls closing again, rejection seeping into every pore. Her chest ached with the realization that even friendship was crumbling under the weight of the child's existence. At the courthouse steps, Emily froze as the baby's father appeared. Daniel Price, tall with sharp features, strode forward in a crisp suit. His voice dripped with disdain. "You should have kept quiet." Emily's pulse raced, her lips trembling. "She's yours," she whispered, barely audible. Daniel smirked, eyes cold. "She's your problem." The words hit like knives. Reporters snapped photos, the crowd murmured, whispers fueling her shame. Emily's hands clenched into fists as tears welled, but she refused to collapse before him. She whispered through gritted teeth, "She deserves better than you." For the first time, her voice carried strength, though her body shook with fear. Emily sat alone on her bed that night, the house silent except for the ticking clock. Her body trembled as she whispered, "I can't hold this alone." Shadows stretched across the walls, pressing in like judgment. She remembered every harsh word from her father, every cold stare from Claire, every venomous line from Daniel. The baby's image filled her mind, fragile yet unyielding. Tears streaked her face as she clutched the blanket, whispering, "You're all I have." Her chest rose in uneven breaths as she realized the cruel truth. Everyone had abandoned her, yet the child remained. In that moment, pain and love tangled into something terrifyingly unbreakable. Emily stood in her father's study, the air thick with dust and silence. Richard Hart glared at her, his jaw tight, his fists resting on the desk. "You were never meant to know," he said flatly. Her stomach dropped, her voice cracking. "What do you mean?" His eyes avoided hers, shifting toward the family photographs on the wall. The silence between them grew heavier, pressing on her chest. "That child," he began, then stopped, swallowing hard. Emily's hands shook as dread coursed through her veins. "Tell me the truth," she whispered. Richard finally met her gaze, his face hardened by guilt. "She isn't Daniel's. She's closer to this family than you think." The words splintered her world in an instant, leaving her gasping for breath. Emily's voice shook as she demanded, "Whose child is she?" Richard's lips pressed into a thin line, eyes narrowing with pain. "She belongs to your sister," he muttered. Emily's body jolted as if struck. Claire, she whispered, disbelief slicing her chest. He shook his head. Not Claire. His silence lingered before he finally whispered, your brothers. Emily staggered back, her breath stolen, her mind unraveling. The betrayal burned through her veins, too sharp to contain. You hid this from me, she choked out. Richard's eyes glistened with regret. It was to protect the family. Emily's cry tore from her throat, raw and trembling. Protect who? You destroyed me. Emily stormed into the street, cold wind whipping her hair across her tear-streaked face. She whispered to herself, my brother, how could he? The truth weighed heavier than chains, pulling her deeper into despair. Cars passed, their headlights slicing through the dark, but she barely noticed. Her breath turned white in the night air as her hands shook violently. She remembered moments with her brother, his laughter, his comfort, now shattered into lies. She whispered, the child was his, and they made her mine. Rage boiled inside her, twisting into grief. For the first time, she realized the betrayal was deeper than Daniel, deeper than Claire. Her entire family had drowned her in silence. Emily burst into Claire's apartment, eyes blazing. Claire froze mid-step, confusion on her face. What's wrong? Emily's voice cracked like thunder. You knew. Claire's eyes widened, lips parting but no words escaping. Emily advanced, trembling. The baby isn't Daniel's, it's Michael's. Claire's silence screamed guilt. Emily's chest heaved, her throat raw. Why didn't you tell me? Claire's face crumpled, tears brimming. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered. Emily's cry shattered the air. You destroyed me instead. Silence fell heavy, broken only by Claire's sobs and Emily's ragged breathing, their friendship fracturing under the weight of betrayal. Emily collapsed onto the floor of her bedroom, her body shaking uncontrollably. The truth circled her like vultures, tearing pieces of her apart. She whispered, she was his, and you all made her mine. Her chest heaved as sobs ripped through her. The baby's cry echoed in her mind, no longer innocent but bound to betrayal. She pressed her hands over her ears, desperate to block it out, yet it grew louder, drowning her in guilt. How do I love her now? She whispered, her voice breaking. No answer came, only silence that felt heavier than death. The betrayal had rewritten her world, leaving her in ruins with only the child's fragile breath as proof of what was real. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as Emily stood alone at the center, her chest rising in jagged breaths. Daniel sat smug at the defense table, his suit flawless, his smirk cutting like glass. Richard sat behind him, face carved from stone, while reporters filled the benches with hungry eyes. Emily whispered to herself, I can't break now. The judge's gavel struck, silencing the room. Daniel leaned forward, his voice dripping venom. She is unstable. She doesn't deserve that child. Emily's body trembled, but her voice cut through the silence. She's mine. You abandoned her, all of you, but she called my name. Gasps filled the courtroom, the weight of her words shaking every corner. For the first time, Emily didn't shrink. She stood taller, her pain blazing into defiance. Daniel rose, voice booming with arrogance. She wants pity, but she's weak. Emily's heart pounded as his words echoed like daggers. She steadied her breath, her hands trembling before she clenched them into fists. Weak, she whispered, her voice cracking but growing louder. Weak is abandoning a child. Weak is hiding behind lies. Daniel's smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing as the courtroom murmured. Emily's tears fell, but she didn't flinch. I'm terrified every second, but I stayed. I stayed when no one else did. Her voice broke, raw and desperate, but it carried strength sharper than his polished cruelty. The judge leaned forward, silence thickening, the weight of her words filling the air like thunder. Richard finally rose from his seat, his voice heavy with authority. Enough. Courtroom stilled as his gaze fixed on Emily. You were never meant to raise her. This family made that choice. Emily's lips trembled, her chest heaving. You chose for me, she whispered. Her eyes locked on his, filled with rage and grief. "And you destroyed me." Richard's jaw tightened, guilt flickering but never softening. Emily's voice rose, cracking under pressure. "I carried your silence, your shame, your lies. And still, she called me Mama." The words struck like lightning, splitting the room into silence. Richard faltered, his authority wavering for the first time as Emily stood unbroken before him. Claire entered suddenly, her face pale, tears streaking her cheeks. "Stop!" she cried, her voice breaking. All eyes turned as she stumbled into the aisle. Emily's breath caught, her heart hammering. "Claire!" she whispered. Claire's voice cracked, trembling under the weight of truth. "It's true. The child isn't Daniel's. She's Michael's. I helped hide it." Gasps erupted, the courtroom exploding in whispers. Emily's legs buckled, the betrayal cutting fresh wounds. Claire sobbed openly. "I thought I was protecting you." Emily's body shook with rage, her voice low and guttural. "You destroyed me, and you destroyed her." The words struck like a blow, silencing even Claire's sobs. The gavel struck again, but the room's chaos could not be tamed. Emily stood trembling, tears pouring freely, her voice cutting through the storm. "You all lied, abandoned, betrayed. But she chose me." Her chest heaved, every word raw and searing. She turned toward Daniel, her voice rising. "You turned your back." Toward Richard. "You buried the truth." Toward Claire. "You pretended it was protection." Emily's fists clenched as she shouted, "But she called me Mama." Silence swallowed the room. For the first time, Emily's pain burned into power. She was broken, but she was unyielding, her voice echoing in every heart that dared to listen. The courtroom had emptied, leaving only echoes of voices that once thundered. Emily sat alone on the wooden bench, her body trembling from exhaustion. The baby slept in her arms, soft breaths rising and falling like a fragile melody. She whispered, "You're all I have." Her mind replayed every betrayal, each one leaving scars she feared would never fade. But the warmth of the child's body pressed against her chest anchored her to the present. Tears streaked her face, but they no longer fell from weakness. They were a release, a quiet surrender to something greater than her pain. The silence felt less like judgment and more like a pause, as if the world itself waited for her choice. She whispered again, voice breaking, "I'll stay. Even if it destroys me, I'll stay." Her chest rose, trembling, but she didn't let go. For the first time, Emily felt she was choosing, not being chosen. Emily returned to her father's house, the silence of the hallway pressing heavy. Richard stood at the doorway, his face hard yet weary, his hands gripping the frame as if holding himself together. Emily's voice cracked. "You lied to me." He lowered his gaze, whispering, "I thought it would protect you." Emily's chest heaved, rage and sorrow intertwining. "You didn't protect me, you destroyed me." Richard's lips trembled, his eyes shining with guilt he could not hide. For a moment his shoulders sagged, the weight of years crumbling his pride. He whispered, "I failed you." Emily tightened her hold on the baby, her voice sharp yet trembling. "You failed her too." The silence that followed was suffocating, yet for the first time, Richard's mask of stone cracked. He reached out slightly, not to touch, but as if searching for forgiveness he knew he might never receive. Claire sat across from Emily in the cafe where they once laughed over secrets, but now silence stretched between them. Claire's eyes were swollen from crying, her hands gripping a coffee cup she hadn't touched. Emily's voice broke the silence, sharp and trembling. "You betrayed me." Claire flinched, her lips trembling. "I thought I was saving you from worse." Emily's jaw tightened, her tears burning with rage. "You saved yourself. You left me alone." Claire's hands shook, coffee sloshing. "I lost too," she whispered, voice hollow. Emily looked at her, her chest rising in heavy breaths. "Then maybe we both lost," she said, her tone softer but still laced with pain. The baby stirred in Emily's arms, soft whimper breaking the silence. For a fleeting moment, Claire's eyes softened, but the distance between them remained, wide as an ocean. Emily stood at Michael's grave, the brother whose secrets had shattered everything. The cemetery was silent, only the rustle of leaves in the cold wind. She whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice trembled, breaking under the weight of unanswered questions. The baby slept in her arms, her soft breathing like fragile music against the heavy silence. Emily's tears fell freely, dripping onto the headstone. "They made me carry your lies," she said bitterly, her chest heaving. "But she called me Mama." The words broke her, and yet they gave her strength. She pressed the child closer, her tears soaking into the baby's blanket. The grave stood silent, but the truth no longer held her captive. For the first time, Emily felt she wasn't speaking to the dead, but to herself, reclaiming what had been stolen. That night, Emily sat by the window of her small apartment, city lights glowing faintly in the distance. The baby lay against her chest, tiny fingers curled into her shirt. She whispered, "I don't know if I can be what you need." Her voice cracked, filled with exhaustion and fragile hope. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was fragile, like glass that might break with a single wrong move. She brushed a strand of hair from the baby's face, her tears falling softer now. "But I'll try," she whispered, her lips trembling. The baby stirred, sighing softly, a sound that carried more weight than words. Emily's chest rose and fell, no longer with panic, but with the quiet acceptance of her new reality. She whispered again, "We'll learn together." The words felt like a vow, fragile but unbreakable. Emily walked through the city streets, the baby cradled against her chest. Neon lights glowed above, people brushed past, their eyes lingering with curiosity and judgment. She whispered, "They'll always stare." Her breath fogged in the cold night air, her arms tightening protectively around the child. Every shadow reminded her of whispers, every glance a reminder of the weight she carried. But the baby's soft sigh quieted her fear. "I'm not running anymore," she said, her voice raw but steady. For years she had been defined by others' choices, crushed under lies she didn't choose. Now, holding this fragile life, she felt something shift. "You'll know me," she whispered, her tears warm against the baby's hair. For the first time, the stares didn't matter. Only the weight in her arms, the life that had called her name, defined her. Back in her apartment, Emily placed the baby gently into a small crib she had borrowed from a neighbor. The walls were bare, the air cold, but the child's presence warmed the silence. Emily knelt beside the crib, her hand hovering above the baby's chest as if afraid to touch too hard. "I don't know what tomorrow will be," she whispered, her voice fragile. Memories of betrayal pressed at her edges, but the steady rise and fall of the child's chest pulled her back. She wiped her tears with the back of her sleeve, her body trembling with exhaustion. "But I'll wake up for you," she whispered, her lips shaking but her words certain. The baby stirred, curling tighter in her blanket, and Emily's heart softened with a pain that felt almost holy. Emily sat by the window, city lights flickering in the distance. She whispered, "I used to dream of escape." Her hand gently stroked the baby's back, the child breathing steadily against her. "But maybe staying is harder, braver." Her chest rose unevenly, every breath still carrying fragments of fear, yet now stitched with fragile strength. She thought of Richard, of Claire, of Daniel, all their voices trying to drown her. But none of them mattered now. The baby's tiny hand grasped her finger, fragile but unrelenting. Emily's tears blurred the glowing skyline as she whispered, "You'll never know the silence I lived in." She leaned her forehead against the glass, the city humming beneath her. "You'll hear love instead." Her words cracked but lingered, as though sealing a vow to a future she never thought she could give. The baby cried in the middle of the night, the sound sharp, pulling Emily from shallow sleep. She rose, body aching, eyes heavy, but she didn't hesitate. She lifted the child, pressing her against her chest. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice a mix of exhaustion and devotion. She rocked gently, the cries softening with each sway. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed, tears pooling, "but I'll never leave you." The room was dark, The city sounds faint, but in that moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to the two of them. Emily's lips brushed the baby's forehead as she whispered, "You're mine." Her voice cracked, breaking into sobs, but they were no longer sobs of fear. They were a surrender to love she couldn't deny. Dawn broke through the window, soft light spilling across the floor. Emily sat in the chair, the baby asleep against her chest, her body weary, but her eyes alive. She whispered, "I never wanted to be a mother." Her lips trembled, the words catching in her throat. She closed her eyes, pressing her cheek against the baby's soft hair. "Until you called me Mama." Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full, alive, almost sacred. Emily's tears slipped quietly, but her chest no longer shook with fear. For the first time, she felt the world wasn't against her but waiting for her. The baby stirred, a tiny sigh escaping, and Emily smiled faintly through her tears. The final line echoed in the room like a vow etched into eternity. "You gave me back to myself."